He pulled the dead man's horse out of the ravine at dawn, hands bleeding through his gloves, and not one person in Silver Pine Valley dared ask Elias Carter if he was all right. They never did. They just watched him do the impossible and called it strength when every single one of them knew it was something else entirely. If this story reaches your heart the way it reached mine, subscribe to our channel and follow along until the very end. Drop a comment and tell me what city are you watching from. I want to know how far this story has traveled. The first thing Anna Bell Monroe did when her wagon wheel cracked on the road into Silver Pine Valley was get down. Study the brake for 30 seconds and start unloading cargo to lighten the axle. She did not look around for help. She did not call out. She pulled her sleeves up to her elbows and started working the wheel with her bare hands against the iron brace. She had been doing things alone for a long time. The second thing she did was notice the man on horseback watching her from the ridge above. He sat perfectly still, one hand loose on the reins, the other resting on his thigh. He was not riding down to help. He was not calling out. He was just watching her the way a man watches something he is trying to decide whether to walk away from. Anna straightened up, looked directly at him, and said nothing. He held her gaze for 3 full seconds. Then he turned his horse and rode back over the ridge without a word. That was the first time she saw Elias Carter. She found out his name an hour later when she rolled her damaged wagon into town, and the man at the livery stable saw the direction she had come from. "You come down the North Ridge Road?" he asked. "I did." "See anybody up there?" "A man on a gray horse, tall, dark coat." The stableman set down his tools. "That'd be Elias Carter. He watches the North Ridge every morning. Has for years." He paused. "Don't take it personal that he didn't come down. He doesn't come down for people anymore." Anna did not ask why. She filed the name away and went to find the property she had come here to claim. Her father's letter had described the old Monroe horse station as a working operation with solid bones and good pasture. What Anna found was a building with a collapsed corner of the roof, a corral fence that had given up entirely on 2 sides, a water trough with a crack running the full length of the basin, and a barn door hanging by one hinge at an angle that suggested gravity had made a decision and was waiting for someone to agree with it. She stood in front of it for a long moment. Then she walked inside and started taking inventory. The station sat at the south end of Silver Pine Valley, where the flatland met the first rise of the mountain foothills. It was isolated enough to feel private and close enough to the main road to make it worth something as a relay point for horses. Her father had built it 20 years ago. He had not been back in 12. What the letter had also mentioned in 2 careful sentences near the end was that a man named Harlan Moss had made an offer on the property twice in the last 3 years. The letter said, "Do not sell to him. I cannot explain in writing. Just do not." Anna had kept that letter in her coat pocket for the entire 3-week journey from St. Louis. She was still carrying it when the first knock came on the broken door frame the next morning. She turned around to find a man she did not recognize, lean 40-something, with a hat that sat too perfectly straight and a smile that had been practiced in a mirror. "Miss Monroe," he said, "my name is Harlan Moss. I believe your father and I had some unfinished business." Anna looked at him for a moment. "My father is dead, Mr. Moss." "Yes." Not a flicker of anything on his face. "My condolences. I wanted to reach out before you made any decisions about the property. I have an offer I think you'll find more than generous given the state of things." He glanced around at the deteriorating station with the particular expression of a man who has been watching something fall apart and is pleased by how far it has gone. "I'm not selling," Anna said. Moss blinked once. The smile stayed exactly in place. "Miss Monroe, I understand this must be an emotional time, but I'd encourage you to think practically. A single woman running a horse station in the mountains." "Mr. Moss?" Anna's voice was flat and direct. "I said I'm not selling. I'd ask you to respect that and not come back with the same question dressed in different clothes." A beat of silence. Something moved behind his eyes, not anger exactly. Something more controlled than that. "Of course," he said pleasantly. "The offer stands whenever you change your mind." He turned and walked back to his horse. He did not look back. Anna stood in the broken doorway and watched him go. Then she took her father's letter out of her coat pocket and read it one more time. Do not sell to him. She folded it carefully and put it back. She needed help. She was not going to pretend otherwise to herself, even if she would not admit it to another living soul in this town. The station needed structural work she could not do alone. Roof reinforcement, a new water trough, the barn door, the corral fence. She had the money to pay a skilled hand for a few weeks. She did not have the luxury of being particular about who. She asked at the livery stable. The man gave her 3 names. 2 were currently hired out to the Garrett Ranch through the end of the month. The 3rd name he said with a slight hesitation. Elias Carter fixes things. Better than anyone in the valley, probably. But he's... The man searched for the word. He's selective. Meaning he might say no. Meaning he's said no to just about everyone who's asked him for something that wasn't an emergency. Anna considered this. Is he honest? As the day is long. Does he do good work? Never seen better. She nodded. Where does he live? The ride up the North Ridge took 40 minutes. The cabin sat at the edge of a pine stand with a view down the full length of the valley. It was a well-maintained structure, not elaborate, but tight and solid, every board doing exactly what it was supposed to do. There was a vegetable garden on the south side and a corral with 3 horses. Everything about the place said a man who knows how to take care of things. She knocked. He took a long time to answer. When he opened the door, he was still holding a mallet, which meant she had interrupted his work. He looked at her the way he had looked at her from the ridge, assessing, contained, giving nothing away. Mr. Carter, she said. My name is Anna Monroe. I've taken over the old horse station at the south end of the valley. I need skilled repair work, and I understand you're the best man for it. I'm offering fair wages, and I expect you to set your own schedule. I'm not looking for conversation or company, just the work. He was quiet for a moment. The Monroe station's been empty for 12 years. 11. Roof's half gone. I know. That's a 2-week job minimum if you want it done right. I know that too. He looked at her steadily. Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth, not yet, but a slight recalibration. She had not flinched or softened anything she'd said. He seemed to notice that. I'll come look at it Thursday, he said. I'll be there. He nodded once and started to close the door. Mr. Carter. He paused. Thank you. He said nothing. The door closed. He came. Thursday. The way he said he would arrived at dawn without announcement, walked the entire station twice without speaking, and then produced a small notebook and began writing in it. Anna watched him for a few minutes, then went back to what she was doing, sorting through the tack room, cataloging what was usable and what was not. An hour later, he appeared in the tack room doorway. The roof corner needs new joists before anything else, or the whole section comes down in the first heavy snow. The trough I can recast if you've got the materials. The corral, 3 of your posts are rotted through. The barn door hinge is salvageable. He paused. I can start Monday. What's your rate? He told her. It was lower than she expected. She almost said something about it, then didn't. Monday's fine, she said. He left without any further conversation. He came Monday. He came Tuesday. He came every day that first week without being asked, arrived at first light, worked through until the afternoon, packed up and left. He did not eat the food she offered the first time. He did not stop to talk. He answered direct questions with direct answers and nothing else. Anna watched the way he worked. There was something almost meditative about it, the way he focused on each task completely, the way his hands knew exactly what to do without his brain needing to negotiate. He had clearly been doing physical work his whole life, but it was more than skill. It was like the work itself was the only language he trusted. She noticed other things too. He never looked at the families who passed on the road below. Or rather, he looked and then very deliberately looked away. Once a pair of children ran along the fence line laughing and calling to each other, and Elias went so still that Anna stopped what she was doing and watched him. He stood with a board in one hand and a nail in the other, completely motionless. His eyes fixed on something in the middle distance that had nothing to do with children or fences. Then he blinked, drove the nail, moved on. She said nothing about it. By the second week, the rhythm of the work had established itself. Elias would arrive, begin the day's task, and Anna would work nearby, not partnering with him exactly, but occupying the same space. They were comfortable in the same silence, which said something that neither of them acknowledged. On Wednesday of the second week, she was up on the roof herself, clearing debris from the section he was about to reinforce, when she slipped. She caught the edge of the joist with both hands, her legs swinging free, and in the same second she heard him below. Not a shout, not a word, just the sound of someone moving very fast. His hands caught her ankles and grounded her before she had time to fully process what was happening. She found her footing, pulled herself back to a stable position, and looked down at him. He was standing directly below, one hand still near her boot, looking up at her with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Not calm, not contained. Something raw had come through the surface for exactly 2 seconds before he locked it back down. "You all right?" he asked. "Yes." She caught her breath. "Thank you." He nodded once and went back to his work without another word. But his hands, she noticed, were not entirely steady for the next few minutes. That evening, she found a loose board on the barn step that she hadn't noticed before. Repaired, pared and re-nailed, so freshly done. The wood smell was still sharp. He had done it at some point during the day without mentioning it, without asking if she wanted it done. She stood looking at it for a moment. Then she went inside. The man who came to see her the following Friday was not Harlan Moss. He was younger, harder looking, with the particular quality of stillness that belongs to men, paid to watch rather than to work. He said his name was Dugan. He said he was passing through. He was not passing through. He walked the fence line slowly, looking at the repaired sections. He looked at the new joists visible through the barn opening. He looked at the water trough. He was taking inventory the way a man does when he wants to know how much something is worth now compared to what it was worth before. "Nice work on the roof," he said pleasantly. "Thank you." "You hire someone local?" Anna met his eyes. "Is there something I can help you with, Mr. Dugan?" He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Just being neighborly." He touched the brim of his hat. "Mr. Moss sends his regards." He rode away at an easy pace. Anna watched until he was out of sight. Then she went to find Elias, who was in the corral working on the last of the fence posts. "The man who just left," she said without preamble. "His name is Dugan. He works for Harlan Moss. This is the second approach Moss has made since I arrived." Elias didn't stop working. He drove the post another 2 inches before he looked up. "What did he want?" "To see how much value had been added since I got here. To report back on whether I'm going to be easy to push out or whether it's going to take more effort." Elias studied her. "You know Moss." "I know what my father told me about him, and I know what a man looks like when he's calculating." A pause. "Moss has been buying land in this valley for 6 years. The Tanner family sold after their well dried up. The Brennan place after the fire." He stopped. Something went through his face, quick, controlled, gone. "There were others." "Did he approach you?" 4 years ago." Elias set down the post driver. "I told him no. And since then, nothing directly." He looked out across the valley. "He doesn't push men like me. He finds softer ground." Anna nodded slowly. "He thinks I'm softer ground." Elias looked at her for a moment. "Are you planning to do something about it?" "I'm planning to stay," she said. "Everything else follows from that." She had been in Silver Pine Valley for 23 days when she found the locked box. It was in the tack room, wedged behind the old saddle rack, a small wooden box banded with iron with a lock that had rusted shut. Her father's initials were burned into the lid. She sat with it for a long time before she went to get a chisel. Inside was a bundle of papers, correspondence mostly going back 7 or 8 years. Some of it was mundane supply orders, horse sale records. But beneath the supply records was a different kind of letter entirely. Handwritten, unsigned on paper that matched the quality of stationery used by lawyers and offices, not working men. She read it twice slowly. Then she read it a third time. The letter was not addressed to her father. It was addressed to a man named James Whitfield, who appeared to be a land surveyor. It discussed a corrected boundary assessment for properties in Silver Pine Valley, Colorado, and it referenced a payment of $400 for services rendered. The letter was dated October 1879. The signature was missing. But at the bottom of the letter, in different handwriting, her father's handwriting, were 4 words. Moss. Do not sell. Anna sat very still for a moment. Then she folded the letter carefully, put it inside her coat, and began to think. She did not tell Elias about the letter that day. She needed to think it through first. She needed to understand what exactly she was holding, what it proved, what it implied, and who else might know it existed. But that evening, when Elias was gathering his tools to leave, she asked him something she had not planned to ask. "The Tanner family," she said. "The ones who sold. Where did they go?" He stopped moving. Something changed in his posture, very slight, barely visible, but she had been watching him for 3 weeks, and she caught it. "North," he said. "They took what Moss paid them and went north. Haven't heard from them since." "Were they friendly with my father?" Elias turned to look at her directly. "Why are you asking about the Tanners?" "I found some of my father's papers," she said carefully. "I'm trying to understand the history of the valley." Howe was quiet for a moment. "William Tanner and your father were close for a while. Before—" He stopped. "Before what?" He shook his head, not evasively, like he was deciding how much was his to tell. "I don't know the whole of it. I know something happened between them, something to do with a land survey years back. After that, they stopped speaking." Anna felt something cold and certain move through her chest. A land survey. Years back. Corrected boundary assessment. Payment of $400. Elias. Her voice was even deliberate. "What do you know about Harlan Moss and the way land changes hands in this valley?" He looked at her for a long time. Long enough that she understood he knew more than he'd said. Possibly more than he'd said to anyone. "More than I've told most people," he finally admitted. "Then I think," she said quietly, "we need to talk." He did not leave when he had planned to. They sat across from each other at the rough table in the station's front room, and Elias talked. Not easily, he chose each word like he was picking his way across uncertain ground. But he talked. 6 years ago, he had noticed a pattern. Properties in the valley that bordered the northern creek line. The properties with the best water access were changing hands. Some through hardship. Some through offers that came at exactly the right moment after a run of bad luck. The bad luck was too consistent, too well-timed. He had started paying attention. He had spoken to Judge Alcott in town, who had listened politely and done nothing. He had written to the county land office. A response came back months later, confirming that all transactions appeared properly documented. "Properly documented," Anna said. "Yes." A corrected boundary survey could make a transaction appear properly documented, even if the original boundaries were drawn differently. He went very still. "What did you find in those papers?" She told him about the letter. Not everything, she described it carefully, watching his face. When she mentioned the date October 1879, she saw it. A shift so fast it was almost invisible. But it was there. "What happened in October 1879? She asked quietly. Elias put both hands flat on the table, looked at them. "My wife died in November 1879, he said, 1 month after that date." The room was very quiet. She was coming back from the valley on the North Ridge Road, he said, in the dark. The official story was that her horse spooked at something and the wagon went over. Anna did not speak. "There was a man," Elias said very slowly, "who owed Moss money. He was seen on that road earlier in the evening." He stopped. "I could never prove it was anything more than coincidence. Everyone told me it was grief making me see things that weren't there. Eventually he exhaled. Eventually I stopped looking. Because no one would help you look. Because I had nothing, just a feeling, and a date that didn't line up. Anna reached into her coat and set the folded letter on the table between them. He looked at it. He did not touch it. That letter has a date, she said. And it has your wife's handwriting on the back. She paused. I didn't tell you that part earlier. The 4 words at the bottom, Moss. Do not sell. That's not my father's hand. I've been comparing it all evening to the other correspondence in the box. Elias's jaw tightened. The muscle in his cheek went hard. Whose hand is it? He asked. I think, Anna said carefully, it may be your wife's. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Anna had ever sat inside. Elias did not move. He sat with both hands on the table and both eyes on the letter, and he did not move for a long time. When he finally looked up, something had changed in his face. Not broken, something older than broken. Something that had been waiting 10 years to be called by its right name. She knew, he said. I think she found out. I think she was bringing that letter somewhere the night she died. He stood up from the table, walked to the door, put one hand against the frame and stood there with his back to her. Elias. She did not soften her voice. This was not the moment for soft. What Moss did, if he did it, he's still doing it. Right now. To this land. To you. To me. To anyone who has water access property and something that looks like vulnerability. She paused. We have one piece. We need to find the rest. He turned around slowly. His face was something she would not forget, grief and fury, and something that had been locked in a room for 10 years, suddenly standing in the light. Where do we start? He said. Anna picked up the letter. With the surveyor, she said. James Whitfield. If he's still alive, he knows who signed this. Elias nodded once. And for the first time since she had arrived in Silver Pine Valley, Anna Bell Monroe felt the full weight of what she had walked into and did not step back from it. Neither of them slept much that night, and Roy Duggan, who had been watching the station from the tree line since dark, rode hard back to Harlan Moss's house before midnight with a single report. They had found something. He didn't know what yet, but the Carter man had not left when he was supposed to, and the Monroe woman had not looked frightened. That, Dugan told Moss, was the part that worried him. Moss sat in his chair by the fire for a long moment. Then he set down his glass. Find out what she has, he said quietly, and then make sure it gets lost. Dugan rode hard enough that his horse was lathered by the time he reached Moss's gate, and that told Anna everything she needed to know. The following morning, when Elias arrived before sunrise and said without greeting, We've got maybe 2 days before Moss moves. She didn't ask how he knew. She handed him a cup of coffee and said, Then we start today. They had one piece of paper and one name. James Whitfield, the surveyor, whose name appeared on the letter Anna had found in her father's box. Whether the man was still alive, still in Colorado, still capable of saying anything useful, none of that was certain. What was certain was that if Moss had paid Whitfield $400 in October 1879 to falsify a boundary assessment, and if Rebecca Carter had somehow gotten hold of documentation of that payment, then Whitfield was either a man terrified into silence or a man who had been made permanently quiet in a different way. Elias knew the Land Registry Office in Durango kept filed survey records going back 30 years. If Whitfield had submitted corrected assessments on multiple valley properties, not just the Monroe land, not just the Tanner place, but a pattern across the creekline properties, that pattern would be visible in the filings if you knew what to look for, and if you had someone with legal standing to ask the right questions. I know a lawyer in Durango, Elias said. Name is Henry Alcott. Not the judge's nephew, different kind of man entirely. You trust him? He's the only man in the county I'd bring this to. Then one of us needs to go to Durango. That'd be me. He said it flatly. Not a discussion. Anna looked at him. And while you're in Durango, I stay here alone with whatever Moss is planning to move in 2 days. I can be back by nightfall tomorrow if I leave within the hour. Or, she said, I come with you and we lock the station. If we both leave, Moss's people walk the property freely. They find the box. they find anything else your father left that we haven't looked at yet." She knew he was right. She didn't like it, but she knew it. "Go," she said. "I'll be here." He set down his cup, looked at her with the expression she was starting to recognize, the one where he was measuring not whether she was capable, but whether she understood what she was agreeing to. "Don't let Dugan inside if he comes," he said. "Don't let anyone inside." "I wasn't planning to." "And if Moss himself comes?" "I'll be polite," she said, "and I'll say nothing." He held her gaze one moment longer. Then he walked out to saddle his horse. She stood in the doorway and watched him go, and she was very careful not to let herself think about the last woman who had ridden away from Elias Carter on an important errand and never come back. Haimade, Durango in under 5 hours, which meant pushing his horse harder than he liked. The land registry office was a low brick building next to the assayer's office, staffed by a clerk named Prewitt, who had the particular demeanor of a man who considered every request an intrusion on his personal time. Elias was not in a mood for careful handling. "I need filed survey records for Silver Pine Valley properties from 1876 through 1882, he said. "Specifically, any corrected boundary assessments submitted by a surveyor named James Whitfield." Prewitt looked up slowly. "Survey filings are public record, but retrieval of historical documents requires a formal written request submitted." "How much," Elias said, "is your time worth to you today?" A pause. "The records room is in the back." It took 40 minutes to find what he was looking for, and when he found it, his hands went still on the paper. Not one corrected assessment. Not two. 7. 7 separate boundary refilings on Silver Pine Valley properties between 1877 and 1881, all submitted by James Whitfield, all resulting in adjustments that shifted creekline water access from the smaller property holders to a larger consolidated holding. A holding whose owner of record was a land corporation called Western Range Partners, headquartered in Denver. Western Range Partners, not Harlan Moss directly. A layer of distance, a company name, a structure that would look completely ordinary unless you knew what to look for. Elias sat very still with those 7 filings in front of him. Then he went to find Henry Alcott. Alcott was younger than Elias expected, maybe 32, with the focused manner of someone who had learned early that being underestimated was a tool if you used it correctly. He listened to Elias without interrupting, which was more than most men had done in the past 10 years. When Elias finished, Alcott said, "Western Range Partners dissolved in 1883, but dissolution doesn't erase the transaction record." "Can you trace who owned it?" "I can try. It'll take time I don't have today." He looked at the copies Elias had made of the 7 filings. These by themselves are circumstantial. A survey error on one property is a mistake. 7 errors, all favoring the same acquiring party over 4 years, is a pattern. But pattern alone isn't proof of conspiracy. "There's a letter," Elias said, "unsigned on my partner's property. References a payment to Whitfield, $400. Alcott's eyes sharpened. "Signed by?" "Not signed, but annotated in handwriting I believe I can identify." Alcott was quiet for a moment. If that handwriting belongs to someone who is now dead, it becomes both more powerful and more complicated. Courts are skeptical of documents from deceased individuals without corroborating testimony. "Whitfield," Elias said, "if he's still alive." "Last I heard, James Whitfield was running a small survey practice in Pueblo. Whether he'll talk is another question entirely. If he knew what his work was used for." "He knew," Alcott said bluntly. "Men who do that kind of work always know. The question is whether he's more afraid of what happens if he stays quiet or what happens if he talks." He looked at Elias steadily. "You're building something here. It's not ready yet. You need the Whitfield link, or you need someone who was directly harmed and can testify to the sequence of events." "The Tanner family," Elias said. "William Tanner's property was one of the 7. Alcott nodded slowly. "Find the Tanners. I'll see what I can learn about Western Range Partners' ownership structure." He stood, extended his hand. "Editor, whoever's sitting on that Monroe property right now, make sure they're not alone tonight." Elias shook his hand, turned and walked out of the office at a pace that was almost a run. Back at the station, Anna was not having a quiet day. Dugan had arrived mid-morning, which she had expected. What she had not expected was that he brought a woman with him. Perhaps 50, dressed well enough for town, with the careful smile of someone delivering a message wrapped in pleasantries. "Mrs. Hargrove," the woman said, introducing herself. "I sit on the Silver Pine Valley Ladies Auxiliary. We like to welcome new arrivals properly." Anna invited them to stand on the porch, which was not quite the same as inviting them inside. "That's very kind," she said. "We were hoping," Mrs. Hargrove continued, "that you might consider joining us for our Thursday gathering at the church hall. It would be a wonderful opportunity to meet the community." Dugan stood slightly behind and to the right of Mrs. Hargrove. He was looking at the barn with professional interest, looking at the repaired roof, looking at the new trough, looking at everything Elias had built. "Thursday," Anna said pleasantly. "I'll see if I can manage it." She shifted one step to the left, blocking Dugan's line of sight to the barn's interior. "I'm afraid I'm in the middle of inventory work today. Thank you so much for coming." Mrs. Hargrove's smile stayed exactly in place, which told Anna the woman was either genuinely oblivious or deeply practiced. "Of course, we'll leave you to it." She paused. "Mr. Moss also wanted me to mention he's holding a community dinner at his ranch on Friday evening. All the Valley families are invited. He'd very much like you to attend." "I'll keep it in mind," Anna said. Dugan met her eyes as they turned to leave. His expression said, "We both know what this visit was." She looked back at him steadily. Her expression said, "Yes, we do." After they left, she went through the rest of her father's box. She had been careful the night before, careful in front of Elias, careful in her own head. She had not wanted to pull out everything at once when she was still processing what the first letter meant. But now she had time, and she used it. There were 11 more documents in the box beneath the supply records. Most were genuinely mundane, but 2 were not. The first was a hand-drawn map. Her father's work, she recognized the drafting style from the plans he had made for the station's original layout. It was a rough sketch of Silver Pine Valley's creek line with property boundaries marked. Several of the boundary lines had been drawn twice, once in pencil, one in ink, and the pencil lines and ink lines did not match. Beside 3 of the properties, her father had written dates: 1877, 1879, 1881. The second document was a partial letter, the bottom half torn away, so there was no signature. It was addressed to her father by name. The relevant portion read, "I cannot remain quiet about what I witnessed in the survey of the northern properties. The measurements I was instructed to record do not correspond to the original land grants. I am writing to you because Tanner told me you are someone who might be believed. If something happens to me before I can bring this to a proper authority, please know that the payment records are held at the Durango First National Bank in a deposit account under the name of," and there it ended. The bottom half of the letter was gone. Anna read the partial letter 4 times. Then she got up, walked to the window, and stood looking out across the valley. Her father had known. He had known for years. He had assembled pieces of this and kept them hidden and said nothing publicly, which meant either he had been afraid or he had been waiting for something or someone had gotten to him before he could move, or all 3. She was still standing at the window when she heard a horse coming up the station road at speed. She was at the door before the rider was close enough to identify her hand on the doorframe ready. Elias pulled up and was off the horse in one motion. He looked at her first, checking, she realized, making sure she was still standing and unharmed. Then he came inside. 7 fraudulent surveys, he said. All the same surveyor. All favoring a land company called Western Range Partners. He paused. That company is Moss. 1 layer of separation, but Alcott thinks he can trace it. There's more, Anna said. She laid the map and the partial letter on the table. He read the letter without speaking. Then he looked at the map, tracing the doubled boundary lines with 1 finger. His jaw was tight. The account at Durango First National, he said. If it still exists. If we can access it, it links the payment to whoever commissioned the survey. It's the signature that's missing from the first letter. accessing a private bank account without legal authorization. I'm not suggesting we rob it, Anna said evenly. I'm suggesting that Henry Alcott could subpoena the records with proper grounds. The partial letter is grounds. The 7 survey filings are grounds. Elias nodded slowly. Alcott said he needs the Tanner family, someone with direct testimony. Then we need to find them. That's a problem. He sat down. I don't know where they went. North, I said before, that's all I had. My father might have known. Is there anyone he was close to in the valley? Anyone who kept in contact? He thought for a moment. Ruth Crandall. She runs the dry goods store on Main Street. She and your father corresponded for years. She told me so herself when you arrived. She was expecting you. Then I need to talk to Ruth Crandall. Elias looked up. Tonight. Tomorrow morning. Early. Anna folded the map carefully. One more thing. Dugan came today. His expression tightened. Did he get inside? No. He came with a woman from the ladies' auxiliary, a social call. She paused. He was looking at the barn. He was looking for what Moss thinks you found. Yes. Which means Moss already suspects there's something here worth finding. Which means, we don't have 2 days, Elias said. We have less. They worked through the evening, making copies of every document in the box. Anna writing in her clear, steady hand, while Elias held the originals flat. When they were done, the originals went back in the box, which Elias took up to the cabin on the ridge. The copies went inside Anna's coat against her body. It was the most sensible division of risk either of them could manage. Before he left, he paused in the doorway. Not long, just a beat of hesitation that he probably didn't realize was visible. You did good today, he said. Handling Dugan. I've handled difficult men before. I know. He said it simply not as a compliment, just as a fact he had already assessed and filed. That's not what I meant. He looked at her directly. I meant the rest of it, the box, figuring out what you were holding. She met his gaze. Your wife found it first, she said quietly. Whatever she knew, she was trying to do something about it. The muscle in his jaw moved once. She was like that, he said, and then he walked out before she could say anything more. Ruth Crandall was in her store at 6 in the morning, which suggested either remarkable industry or the inability to sleep. She looked at Anna when she walked in and said without preamble, Your father told me this day might come. I just didn't know when. Anna went very still. What did he tell you? Ruth was a compact woman of about 60, with the direct eyes of someone who had run a business alone for a long time and did not have patience for indirection. She came out from behind the counter, turned the store's sign to closed, and sat down across from Anna. Sit, she said. Anna sat. Your father figured out what Moss was doing back in 1880. He had some of the pieces, not all of them. He knew about the surveys. He knew about Tanner. He knew... She paused. He knew about Rebecca Carter. The name landed in the space between them. Knew what about her? Anna asked carefully. That she'd found the letter, the one with the payment record. That she was going to the county surveyor's office in Durango with it the night she... Ruth stopped, pressed her lips together. She never made it. And my father knew this. He suspected it. He had no proof. He was one man with suspicions against a man with lawyers and money and a judge who owed him favors. Ruth folded her hands on her knees. He was afraid. He kept the documents. He waited. He told me if anything happened to him, and if his daughter ever came to claim the property, I was to tell her one thing. Anna waited. He said the Tanners didn't go north. He told them to tell people that. He helped them settle near Glenwood Springs. Their name is still Tanner. The oldest son, Martin, he was 14 when they left. He's a grown man now. He saw things. Ruth looked at her steadily. He saw Dugan on the property the week before their well failed. The silence in the room was absolute. Their well didn't fail by accident, Anna said. No, it didn't. Anna stood up. Her mind was moving faster than her body could follow. I need to send a letter to Glenwood Springs. Today. Is there someone I can trust with it? Tom Briggs runs the mail. He's honest. Ruth stood too. Miss Monroe, you understand what you're doing. I do. Moss has done this for a long time. He's careful, he's patient, he has the judge, and he has men like Dugan, and he has money that makes legitimate-looking paper out of crimes. Ruth's voice was level, but underneath it was something that had been sitting still for a long time, and was finally being permitted to move. He is not going to let this go quietly. I know, Anna said. And Carter? Ruth asked. He knows all of it now. Most of it. Ruth studied her for a moment. Your father said something else, about Carter. She paused. He said Elias Carter was the most honest man in Silver Pine Valley, and the most broken, and that if anyone could do what needed doing here, it was him, but only if he had a reason that went beyond himself. Anna held the old woman's gaze, said nothing. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Ruth said quietly. I understand, Anna said. Tell me Tom Briggs's schedule. The letter to Martin Tanner in Glenwood Springs went out before 9 in the morning. By 10, Anna was back at the station. By noon, she had found something else. She had been going over the property's original land grant documentation, the papers that established the Monroe Station's official boundaries, when she noticed a discrepancy. The filed survey on record at the station matched the boundary lines in the ink version on her father's hand-drawn map. The ink version. Not the pencil version, which she now understood to be the correct original measurements. Which meant the Monroe Station's filed boundaries had already been altered, which meant Moss did not need to buy the property. He needed only to trigger a legal boundary dispute claim that the Monroe Station's boundaries encroached on land already held by Western Range Partners, and with a corrupted judge and falsified survey records, he could potentially seize a portion of the property without purchase. Not all of it, but the portion that included the creek line water access. Without water access, the station was worthless as a horse relay operation. She sat down very slowly at the table. This was not about the purchase offer. The purchase offer was the polite version. The backup plan was the legal mechanism already in place, already documented, ready to deploy the moment Moss decided politeness had run its course. She needed a lawyer. Not Alcott in Durango, that was too far and too slow. She needed someone local who could file an injunction, something that would freeze any pending boundary claims, while Alcott built the criminal case. She was still thinking when the door opened. She had not heard anyone approach. Roy Dugan stood in the doorway. He was not smiling this time. He had two men behind him that she had not seen before. Miss Monroe, he said. Mr. Moss would like his letter back. Anna looked at him. Her hands were flat on the table. The documents were in plain sight. The copies were inside her coat. I don't know what letter you mean, she said. Dugan stepped inside. The one you found in your father's box. The one that mentions a payment to a surveyor. He took another step. Mr. Moss is willing to be reasonable about this. Return the letter, take the purchase offer which he's prepared to increase, and this is finished today. I told Mr. Moss I wasn't selling. Miss Monroe. His voice shifted, not threatening, which was somehow worse. Almost patient. You are a single woman running a failing property in a valley where a great many things can go wrong very quickly. Wells can dry up. Roofs can fail. Horses can be spooked on mountain roads. He paused on that last one just slightly too long to be accidental. Anna looked at him. She thought about Rebecca Carter on the North Ridge Road in the dark. She thought about the partial letter. She thought about the Tanner's well. Get out of my property, she said. Dugan studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, the nod of a man making a decision, and turned to the door. Tell Mr. Moss, Anna said before he reached it, that I've already sent copies to Durango, and to Glenwood Springs. She paused. And that the next letter goes to the territorial governor's office. Dugan stopped. Didn't turn around immediately. When he did, something had changed in his face for the first time. She saw something that was not quite confidence. You're bluffing. Am I? She said. He held her gaze for 3 full seconds. Then he walked out. Anna sat completely still until she heard the horses leave. Then she let out a slow breath, stood up, went to the door, and shot the bolt. Her hands, she noticed with distant interest, were not shaking. She went back to the table and looked at the original land grant documents. She had not sent any letter to the territorial governor's office, but she was going to. Elias arrived at the station 2 hours later, moving faster than usual, which told her someone had already talked. "Ruth Crandall sent her boy up to find me," he said as he came through the door. "She said Dugan was at your place this morning with 2 men. He was. You're all right." "I'm fine." She told him what Dugan had said, what she had said back. She watched his face while she talked the way it went still, and then very controlled when she got to the part about horses being spooked on mountain roads. When she finished, he said nothing for a long time. "He was telling you they could do what they did to Rebecca," he said. "Yes." Another silence. Then, "Anna, I need you to hear something." She waited. "When I said we start today, when I agreed to help you with this, I thought it was about land, about a pattern of fraud, about what Moss has done to people in this valley." He was looking at her directly. "I didn't understand until this morning what it actually is." "Tell me what you think it is." "This is about my wife." He said it without flinching. "What you found in that box, the letter, the annotation, if that's Rebecca's writing, then she was trying to do something about Moss the night she died. And her death wasn't random, and it wasn't an accident." "No," Anna said quietly. "I don't think it was." "Which means everything I've been living with for 10 years, the story I told myself, the story everyone told me about a spooked horse on a dark road." He stopped. "It was a lie," she said, not harshly, just the word. "Yes." She let that sit between them. She did not try to soften it, or interpret it, or move past it too quickly. She just let him be inside it for a moment. "What do you need from me?" she finally asked. He looked at her with those 10 years behind his eyes, and something that had been buried under all of them, and said, "I need to make sure it doesn't happen to you." "Then help me finish it," she said. He nodded, not the careful nod of a man managing his distance. Something different. Something that had made a decision it was not going to walk back from. "The Tanners," he said. "If Martin Tanner comes." "He'll come," Anna said. "My father helped his family. He'll come. Alcott needs time. Then we give him time and we keep Moss from moving on the boundary claim until Alcott has what he needs." She met his eyes. "Can you stay here tonight?" A beat. Shorter than it would have been 2 days ago. "Yes," he said. Outside, the valley was going dark, and somewhere in a house that was far too comfortable for the man who lived in it. Harlan Moss was reading Roy Duggan's report and understanding for the first time that the Monroe woman was not soft ground, not even close. Martin Tanner arrived on the 4th day. How was not what Elias had expected. He was 24 years old, broad through the shoulders, with the particular stillness of a man who had learned early to be careful about what he showed on his face. He rode alone. He had clearly pushed hard to get there. His horse needed water and rest, and he looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. He tied his horse at the corral post, looked at the repaired fence line, looked at the new trough, and then looked at Anna, standing in the doorway, with the expression of a man who had spent 10 years deciding whether this moment was ever going to come. "Miss Monroe," he said. "Mr. Tanner, come inside." He sat at the table and drank 2 cups of water without speaking. Then he looked at Elias. Really looked the way men do when they're trying to decide if someone is what they appear to be. "You're Carter," he said. "I am. My father talked about you. Said you were the only man in that valley who might have done something if someone had given you a reason." Elias said nothing. Martin Tanner put both hands flat on the table. "I was 14 when we left, but I was old enough to see what I saw, and I've been old enough to know what it meant for a long time." He looked at Anna. "What do you have?" She laid it out. The letter with the payment reference, the partial letter about the survey measurements, the map with the doubled boundary lines, the 7 filed surveys Elias had found in Durango. She told him about Western Range Partners. She told him about the bank account in the name of the land company at Durango First National. Martin listened without interrupting. When she finished, he sat quietly for a moment. Then he said, "The week before our well failed, I saw Roy Duggan on our property, not near the house, Near the well casing on the south side. He paused. I told my father. He said I must have been mistaken. He couldn't afford to believe what it meant. Was anyone else there? Anna asked. A man I didn't recognize. Older, heavy coat. He didn't get close enough for me to see his face. Martin looked at his hands. 3 days later, the water started coming up black. A week after that, it was dry. He looked up. Wells don't go black and then dry in a week from natural causes. No, Elias said quietly. They don't. My father took Moss's offer because we had no water and no way to get any. He knew something was wrong with the deal. He knew. Martin's voice went tight and then controlled again. He died 2 years after we settled near Glenwood Springs. I think he died ashamed. I think he believed he had abandoned something he should have fought for. The room was very still. He didn't abandon it, Anna said. He survived it. That's different. She paused. And you came here. That matters. Martin looked at her. Something shifted in his face, not quite relief. The thing that lives just before relief, when you've been carrying something alone, and someone else finally puts their hands on it too. What do you need from me? He said. A sworn statement, Elias said. What you saw, what you told your father, the timeline. Alcott and Durango will know how to use it. Oh, and the bank account, Anna said. If Alcott can subpoena the records at Durango First National, the payment to Whitfield may connect directly to whoever controlled Western Range Partners. But he needs standing to make that request. Your testimony gives him the standing. Martin nodded slowly. When do we go to Durango? Tomorrow, Anna said. Before Moss has time to... The window behind her shattered. Not a bullet, a rock wrapped in paper thrown hard enough to crack the frame and send glass across the table. All three of them were on their feet instantly. Elias was at the door in 2 strides, pulled it open, and saw nothing but an empty road and the sound of hooves already distant. He came back inside, unwrapped the rock. The paper had 4 words on it. Leave now. Last warning. Nobody slept. Elias spent the night at the door, and Anna spent it at the table going over every document again, looking for anything they had missed. Martin Tanner slept for 3 hours on the floor of the tack room, with his rifle beside him, which told her everything she needed to know about his level of trust and his level of readiness. At first light, Elias made a decision that Anna had not been expecting. You and Tanner go to Durango, he said. Together. I'll stay here. She looked at him sharply. That's backwards from what we planned. Moss doesn't know what Tanner looks like anymore. He's been gone 10 years. 2 of you traveling together, a woman and a young man that reads as family, not as people carrying evidence to a lawyer. He paused. If I go, Dugan follows me. He knows my face and my horse. He's been watching me since this started. And if Moss sends someone here while we're gone, then I'll be here. Elias. I'm not doing it to protect you. His voice was level. I'm doing it because it's the tactically correct decision. She studied him. He met her gaze without flinching. You're also doing it, she said quietly, because you want to be here if they come. Because this is your fight too, and you want to be the one standing on this property when they try. He didn't answer, which was its own kind of answer. Fine, she said. But if something happens, nothing's going to happen. You can't promise that. No, he said. I can't. He looked at her directly. Go. Come back with Alcott's commitment. That's what matters. She held his gaze 1 moment longer. Then she turned and went to wake Martin Tanner. They made Durango by early afternoon. Alcott received them in his office with the focused attention of a man who had been thinking about little else since Elias's visit. Martin Tanner's testimony took 2 hours to record properly. He was precise, specific, and unflinching dates, locations, what he had seen, and when. Anna watched Alcott's face while Martin talked, and she could see the lawyer building something in his head, assembling pieces, testing the structure. When it was done, Alcott sat back and said, "This is enough for a subpoena on the bank records. It will take me 2 days to prepare the application and present it to a judge." "Not Judge Alcott," Anna said immediately. Henry Alcott met her eyes. No, not my uncle. There is a circuit judge from Alamosa who will be in Durango on Thursday. Judge Elara Voss. She has no connection to Moss, no investment in Valley land, and a reputation for conducting herself as if the law means exactly what it says. He paused. She's also been looking for a case that directly challenges the way Western Range Partners has operated in this territory. She's aware of the pattern. She's been waiting for someone to give her the standing to act. Anna felt something shift in the room. Not just strategy. Something larger. She already knows about Western Range Partners, Anna said slowly. She's been watching it for 2 years. The problem has always been documentation and a willing witness. Alcott looked at Martin. You just became both. Martin Tanner said nothing. He was looking at his hands again. Then he looked up and said, My father's land. When this is over, is there any mechanism to reclaim property sold under fraudulent boundary conditions? Alcott was quiet for a moment. It will be complicated. It will take time. But if the surveys are proven fraudulent and the transaction documents are shown to have relied on them, then yes, there is a legal pathway. He paused. I cannot promise the outcome. I can promise to try. Martin nodded once. That was enough. They were 2 hours outside Durango on the return ride when Anna noticed the rider behind them. Not close, not obvious. Just consistently there, the same distance back, moving at the same pace, adjusting when they adjusted. She said nothing to Martin for several minutes. Then she said without turning her head, We're being followed. Don't look. Martin kept his eyes forward. How long? Since we left town. Dugan. I don't think so. Dugan I know. This is someone I haven't seen before. Martin thought for a moment. There's a fork about a mile ahead. Left goes through the canyon faster but narrow. Right goes through Widow's Flat, longer but open. Open ground means anyone following us stays visible. Take the right fork, Anna said. They did. The rider behind them hesitated at the fork. She caught the pause in her peripheral vision and then followed them right. He's still there, she said. Martin said, if we push to a gallop on the flat, we don't know who else might be ahead. We don't know if this is one person or two. She thought quickly. When we reach the Holt Creek crossing, there's a homestead on the north bank, the Garfield place. Ruth Crandall mentioned it. We stop there. 2 people stopping at a homestead in daylight is ordinary. A man following us has to either stop too or pass us and reveal his face. And if he passes us, then we know what he looks like. The rider passed them at the Holt Creek crossing, moving faster suddenly, not looking over. He was young, early 20s, in a coat that was too heavy for the weather. He did not look at them directly as he passed. Anna watched him go. Then she said, he wasn't following us. He was going to get ahead of us. Martin understood immediately. He looked at the road ahead, the section between Holt Creek and the valley entrance, where the tree line came close on both sides. How far to open ground, he said. 3 miles. We don't take that. No, she agreed. We don't. They found a different route, longer by 40 minutes, open the whole way, coming into Silver Pine Valley from the south instead of the north. Anna did not allow herself to think about what might have been waiting on the tree-lined section of the main road until she was past it. Then she allowed herself to think about it for exactly 30 seconds. Then she put it away and focused on getting home. She found Elias standing in the corral with a stranger. Not Duggan. Not anyone she had seen before, a man in his 50s, round-faced, with the look of someone who had recently been frightened and had not yet fully recovered. He was holding his hat in both hands and turning it around and around. Elias looked at her when she rode in, that checking look again, the one that moved over her quickly to confirm she was intact, and then said, Anna, this is James Whitfield. She stopped moving. Whitfield looked at the ground. I heard you were asking about me, he said. Through the registry office. Through channels. He swallowed. I've been waiting for someone to ask for 11 years. Anna got down from her horse slowly. She looked at Elias. He came here himself, Elias said. 3 hours ago. She turned to Whitfield. Why? Because Moss sent Dugan to Pueblo last week. Whitfield said. His voice was unsteady, but he kept talking. I don't know why. Maybe he heard something. Maybe it was routine. Maybe he was just reminding me. But Dugan came and stood outside my office for an entire afternoon, just sat on his horse across the street and watched, and I... He stopped, pressed his lips together. I've been afraid of that man for 11 years. But this time I thought, if Moss is nervous enough to send Dugan to watch me, it means something is happening. And if something is happening and I don't say what I know, then whatever comes next is partly my fault. Anna studied him. You submitted 7 falsified surveys. Yes. You were paid $400. Yes. He couldn't look at her. Moss told me it was a boundary correction, that the original surveys had errors and he was setting them right. I didn't believe him. I should have refused. He stopped again. I had debts. I had a family. Mr. Whitfield. Her voice was not unkind, but it was very clear. Did you know that a woman died on the North Ridge Road the night she was bringing documentation of your work to the county authority? Whitfield looked up. His face went white. I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know that. He looked at Elias, and something in his expression shifted. He was connecting the name Carter with the man standing in front of him, and the color drained even further. I'm sorry, he said. To Elias, directly. I am genuinely, profoundly sorry. Elias looked at him for a long moment. Something moved across his face. Not forgiveness, not yet. Something more complicated than that. The kind of thing that takes longer than a moment to resolve. Can you sign a sworn statement? Elias said. Everything. Who commissioned the surveys, what you were paid, who you dealt with. Yes. And testify if it goes to a hearing. Whitfield's jaw tightened. He was afraid. That was completely visible. But underneath the fear was something that had clearly been looking for a door for a very long time. Yes, he said. I'll testify. That evening, the 4 of them, Anna, Elias, Martin Tanner, and James Whitfield, sat at the table in the station's front room and worked through everything they had. Every piece. Every gap. Every risk. Alcott needed 2 days. Judge Voss would be in Durango Thursday. The subpoena application for the Durango First National Records would go before her that day. If she granted it, the bank records could be accessed Friday morning. The problem was the boundary dispute. Alcott had confirmed that Moss had already filed a preliminary boundary challenge on the Monroe station, filed quietly 3 weeks ago before Anna had even arrived. It was sitting in the county records ready to be activated. If Moss moved it to active status before Thursday, it would go before whatever judge was available, and the only available judge was the compromised one. He hasn't moved it yet, Anna said. Why not? Because he didn't want to escalate until he knew what you had, Elias said. He was trying to buy or scare you out first. Less visibility, less risk. He paused. But now he knows you've been to Durango. He knows you haven't left. He's going to move it. When? Tomorrow. Maybe the day after. Not later than that. Anna thought for a moment. Can we file something first? Not the criminal case that needs Alcott's preparation, but something that freezes the boundary challenge until the criminal matter is heard. A motion to stay, Martin said. Everyone looked at him. My father had a lawyer in Glenwood Springs help him understand the process after we left. A motion to stay the boundary proceeding, pending resolution of a related criminal matter. He paused. It would require a judge to sign it. Judge Voss, Anna said. She's not in jurisdiction until Thursday. Then we need to get a message to her before Thursday, today, tonight. Anna looked around the table. Does anyone have a direct way to reach her? Alcott had given her his card. On the back, he had written 2 things: his home address and the name of his clerk. He had said, if there's an emergency before Thursday, send to my clerk. He knows where to find me. Anna stood up. I'm going to write a letter. Henry Alcott needs to know about the preliminary boundary filing, and he needs to reach Judge Voss before she arrives Thursday morning. She looked at Elias. Who do we trust to ride to Durango tonight? Elias was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Tom Briggs. He's done the mail run in the dark before. He'll do it for the right reason. Get him, she said. Elias left. Martin Tanner looked at Whitfield across the table. Whitfield was looking at the lamp. Mr. Whitfield, Martin said not unkindly. You said you've been waiting 11 years. Yes. Then you understand this is probably going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. Whitfield looked up. I know. Good. Martin's voice was steady and not cruel. Because it's also going to be the most important. Tom Briggs left for Durango at 9 in the evening with 2 letters in his coat pocket and the understanding that something significant was happening in Silver Pine Valley, even if he didn't know the full shape of it. Whitfield slept in the tack room. Martin Tanner was back on the floor with his rifle. Anna sat at the table for a long time after Elias came back. He sat across from her. Neither of them spoke for a while. Then he said, "She kept a journal." Anna looked up. "Rebecca." His voice was careful, measured, like he was carrying something fragile. "I found it in the locked room 2 years after she died. I read part of it. Then I put it back and locked the room again and told myself I'd go back when I was ready." He paused. "I was never ready." "You don't have to tell me this. I know." He folded his hands on the table. "She wrote about Moss in the journal. She'd been piecing it together for months before she died. She figured out about the surveys from something she overheard in town Whitfield, talking to someone she didn't recognize. She wrote, 'I think there's something very wrong happening with the land in this valley, and I don't think anyone is paying attention.'" Anna was very still. "She was 26, he said. She was 3 months from having our first child." He stopped. Something crossed his face that was too big and too old for any expression to properly hold. "She was going to the county office that night. I didn't know what she had found. I thought she was going to visit her friend in town. She didn't tell me because she knew I'd go with her and she thought—" He stopped again. "She thought she was protecting you," Anna said quietly. "Yes." The lamp between them flickered once and settled. "Elias." She chose her words carefully. What she did finding that information and trying to bring it forward, that took extraordinary courage. What happened to her was not the consequence of her courage. It was the consequence of Moss's crime. She paused. "Those are not the same thing." He looked at her. For a long moment he just looked at her. "No," he said finally. "They're not. She would have wanted this," Anna said. "Whatever comes in the next few days, she would have wanted it finished." He nodded, very slowly. The kind of nod that comes from somewhere deeper than agreement. "There's something else," he said. He reached into his coat and set something on the table between them. A small notebook, worn cover. The clasp on the front had been opened recently, the metal still slightly bent from the pressure. Anna looked at it, looked at him. "It's her handwriting," he said. "The last 3 entries. She wrote about what she found, specifically. Names, dates, the surveyor, the payment." He paused. "It's more detailed than the letter. It's more detailed than anything we have." Anna's breath went still. "Elias, this is evidence," he said. "Real evidence. First-person account of what she discovered in her own words dated 11 days before she died." He looked at the notebook on the table. "I've been sitting on it for 10 years because I was afraid of what it would ask me to do. And now?" He met her eyes directly. "Now I know what it asks me to do." He pushed the notebook across the table toward her. "Take it to Alcott. With everything else. Take all of it." Anna put her hand on the notebook. She did not pick it up immediately. She looked at him. "Are you certain?" she said. "I'm certain. This will mean it goes into the public record. Her name, what she found, what she was doing that night." "Yes." His voice did not waver. "She deserves to have it known, that she saw something wrong and she tried to do something about it." He paused. "She deserves better than being remembered as a woman whose horse spooked on a dark road." Anna held his gaze for a long moment. Then she picked up the notebook and held it carefully with both hands. "All right," she said. Outside the valley was dark, and the night was quiet. In the way that nights before, significant things are always quiet, not peaceful exactly, but held. Like the world is taking a breath. In his house on the east side of the valley, Harlan Moss had a conversation with Roy Duggan that ended with Moss saying very quietly, "Move the boundary filing to active status. First thing tomorrow." And Dugan, who had seen the Monroe woman's face when she'd told him she'd already sent copies to Durango, who had seen something in her eyes that he hadn't seen in a long time and didn't entirely know what to do with, hesitated for just a fraction of a second before he said, "Yes, sir." That fraction of a second meant something. He just didn't know yet what. The boundary filing hit the county records office at 8 in the morning. Tom Briggs rode back from Durango with the news before noon. He had delivered the letters confirmed. Alcott received them, and on his way home, stopped at the county office for a separate errand and saw the filing himself. Active status: Monroe Station versus Western Range Partners. Boundary dispute. Assigned to Judge Harold Alcott's docket. The judge. Not Judge Voss. The compromised one. Anna read the filing notice twice. Then she set it on the table and looked at Elias. "He moved faster than we expected," she said. "Yes. Which means he's rattled, or he's finishing it before we can stop him." Elias picked up the filing. "Harold Alcott can rule on a boundary dispute in 48 hours if he wants to. If he rules in Moss's favor before Judge Voss arrives. Thursday, it doesn't matter what the criminal case produces. The land transfer becomes a legal fact. Reversing a property ruling takes years." Martin Tanner had come in from the corral and was reading over Elias's shoulder. "Can we challenge jurisdiction? Ask for the case to be moved to a different docket." "On what grounds?" Elias said. "Conflict of interest," Anna said. Both men looked at her. "Harold Alcott is a judge in a county where his nephew is currently building a criminal case against the same party. That is a direct conflict of interest." She paused. "It might not hold, but it buys time. Even a procedural delay of 24 hours gets us to Thursday." "Who files the challenge?" Martin said. "We need a lawyer of record. Henry Alcott can't do it. That's exactly the conflict we'd be citing." She thought quickly. "Is there another attorney in Durango? Someone not connected to either Alcott?" "Francis Weld," Whitfield said from the corner. Everyone turned. He had been quiet for the past hour, sitting with his hands folded, listening. "She has an office on 3rd Street. She handles property disputes. I used her once years ago for a legitimate survey matter." He looked at Anna steadily. "She's good, and she has no connection to Moss that I know of." "You're certain?" "Not completely, but as certain as I can be." Anna looked at Elias. "Someone needs to ride to Durango again. Today." "I'll go," Martin said. "Not alone," Elias said. "I'll be fine." "They put someone on the road last time," Anna said. "You're not going alone." She looked at Elias. The decision moved between them without words. "Both of you go. I'll stay with Whitfield." Elias held her gaze. "Last time I left you here, Dugan showed up with 2 men. Last time Whitfield wasn't here." She said it calmly. "Moss doesn't know Whitfield came. If he does anything to this property now with his own surveyor sitting inside it, ready to testify against him, he accelerates his own destruction." She paused. "He's not stupid. He won't move on the station directly. He'll try to win through the legal mechanism. And if he gets desperate enough to stop thinking clearly, then Whitfield and I will manage it." Her voice was steady. "Go. Get Francis Weld and get back before dark." Elias looked at her for one long moment, the kind of look that carries more than it says out loud. Then he turned to Martin. "We leave in 10 minutes." They were gone by 1 in the afternoon. Anna spent the first hour going through the documents one more time, not because she expected to find something new, but because movement kept her from the particular anxiety that comes with waiting. Whitfield sat across from her and did not speak for a long time. Then he said, "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "The Carter man, the way he looks at you." He paused awkwardly. "Forgive me, it's not my business." "No," she said, "it isn't." But she said it without sharpness. Whitfield nodded and went quiet again. Then, after another few minutes, "His wife, Rebecca. She came to my office once before that night. She said she had questions about survey methodology. I thought she was just curious. She was friendly, intelligent. I liked her." He stopped. "I found out later what she was actually doing. She had already figured out something was wrong. She was looking for me to confirm it without telling me she knew." He looked at his hands. "She was smarter than I gave her credit for, and I let her walk out of my office without saying anything that would have helped her." Anna set down her pen. "Mr. Whitfield, what would you have said if you'd understood what she was doing?" He was quiet for a long time. "I would have told her to be careful." Another pause. "That's the part that stays with me. I wouldn't have been brave enough to tell her the truth. I would have told her to be careful and let her walk into whatever was waiting." He looked up. "That's not absolution. I know that." "No," Anna said. "It isn't." She held his gaze evenly. "But you're here now. That's what matters for the next 48 hours. What you do in the next 48 hours is the thing you'll actually be remembered for." He nodded. He didn't look relieved. He looked like a man settling into something he intended to see through regardless of how it felt. That was good enough. At 3 in the afternoon, Ruth Crandall arrived at the station on foot, which was unusual enough that Anna had the door open before the woman reached the porch. "Sit down," Ruth said, which was also unusual because it was not her house. Anna sat. "Moss is at the church right now," Ruth said, "talking to Pastor Green. I don't know what he's saying, but he's been there an hour and 3 of the valley's larger landowners are in there with him." She set her hands on her knees. "He's building something. Making sure the community understands the boundary dispute as a property rights matter, a woman from the East coming in and claiming land that may not be hers. He's shaping the narrative." Anna absorbed this. He's trying to get the community on his side before the hearing. He's been doing this for years. He positions himself as the man protecting property values and legal order. Anyone who opposes him gets positioned as a troublemaker or an outsider. Ruth looked at her. "You're both from his perspective. Female from the East, unmarried, challenging an established man in an established community. And Elias. Elias is trickier for him. Elias has goodwill here, people respect him. But Moss will use the grief angle. Say that Carter has been unstable since his wife died. That his judgment can't be trusted. That he's being manipulated by a woman who's using him." Ruth paused. "I've heard him use that kind of language before. It works on some people." Anna was quiet for a moment. "What do I do about it?" Ruth looked at her steadily. "You go to the church. Now, not to confront him, to be seen, to be a person in this community rather than an abstract threat." Ruth's voice was practical, almost brisk. "You know Mrs. Hargrove, she came here with Dugan on that social call. She's not a bad woman. She's a woman who believes what she's told by the men she trusts. If you talk to her directly simply as one woman to another, you change what she tells her husband tonight. And her husband talks to 2 other men on that list. That's how this works. I'm not going to beg for people's good opinion. I'm not asking you to beg. I'm asking you to show up." Ruth stood. Moss wins in empty rooms. He loses in rooms where the other side is present and human and real. She paused at the door. "Come or don't. But come in the next 20 minutes if you're coming." She left. Anna looked at Whitfield. "Go," he said. "I'll be fine. I have nowhere to run and nothing left to lose by sitting here." She looked at him for a moment. Then she stood up, straightened her coat, and went. The church hall was arranged for what appeared to be an informal gathering, tables, chairs, several women with coffee, several men standing in small groups. Moss was at the far end of the room talking to Pastor Green. When Anna walked in, the room did not go silent. It did something more telling. The conversations continued, but several of them shifted direction, and she felt the attention of the room reorganize around her like water moving around a stone. She went to Mrs. Hargrove first. "Mrs. Hargrove." She kept her voice warm and direct. "I've been meaning to find a moment to speak with you properly. I'm sorry I was so brief when you visited." Mrs. Hargrove blinked. Whatever she had been expecting, it was not this. "Oh, not at all, Miss Monroe. You were busy with your work." "I was." Anna sat down beside her without being invited to, which was either bold or comfortable, depending on how you read it. She read it as comfortable. I wanted to ask your advice, actually. You've been in this valley a long time. I'm still learning the community. That was all it took. Mrs. Hargrove was a woman who knew things and had opinions and was rarely asked for either. Within 4 minutes, she was telling Anna about the valley's history, about the families who had come and gone, about the Tanner family's departure, which she had found sad and suspicious at the time, though she'd never said so publicly, about how she had always liked Ruth Crandall and found the dry goods store to be the most reliable establishment in town. Anna listened, genuinely listened. She asked questions. She let the conversation be what it was. She was aware at the periphery of her attention that Moss had noticed her arrival. She could feel the calculation happening from across the room, assessing whether to approach, whether to ignore her, whether her presence here was a threat or an opportunity. He chose to approach. Of course he did. Ignoring her would look weak. Miss Monroe. He was perfectly pleasant, the practiced smile, the steady voice. I didn't expect to see you here. Pastor Green's hospitality is well known, she said. I wanted to meet more of my neighbors. Of course. He paused, and she could feel him working through his options. In front of Mrs. Hargrove and the pastor's wife and 4 other women, he could not be anything other than cordial. I hope you've received notification of the boundary matter. I have. It's purely procedural. These things happen when properties change hands after years of vacancy. I'm sure it will be resolved simply. I'm sure it will be, Anna said pleasantly. Something moved in his eyes. He had wanted her rattled. She was not rattled. He excused himself after 2 more exchanges and went back to the far end of the room. Anna turned back to Mrs. Hargrove and continued their conversation about which families in the valley grew the best kitchen gardens. She stayed exactly 45 minutes. When she left, she had spoken to 11 people. She had said nothing about Moss, nothing about the legal case, nothing about surveys or land fraud. She had simply been a person, a neighbor, a woman who asked questions and listened to the answers. Ruth Crandall caught her eye as she left and gave her the smallest possible nod. It was enough. Elias and Martin came back at 7 in the evening. Frances Weld had agreed to take the case. She had read the filing, the conflict of interest argument, and the timeline in 40 minutes flat, and said she could have a motion on record by 8 the following morning. She's good, Martin said, still slightly surprised. She knew about Harold Alcott's reputation before we mentioned it. A lot of lawyers in Durango know about Harold Alcott, Elias said. Nobody's done anything about it because nobody's had standing. He looked at Anna. She thinks the conflict of interest motion has a reasonable chance of forcing a reassignment. If it gets assigned to any judge other than Harold Alcott, we gain time. Enough time for Voss to arrive Thursday. One more thing, Anna said. She told them about Ruth's report, about Moss at the church, about the community relations campaign he was running, about her 45 minutes at the church hall. Elias stared at her. You went to the church? Yes. While Moss was there? Yes. You went and had a conversation with his audience while he was in the room? That's approximately what happened. He looked at her for a long moment. Something moved across his face that was not quite a smile. It was the expression of a man reassessing something he thought he already understood and finding it considerably larger than he'd measured. Did it work? Martin asked. I don't know yet, Anna said. But it was the right thing to do. He wins in empty rooms, so I didn't leave the room empty. Martin nodded slowly. Then he looked at Elias, then back at Anna. He was smart enough not to say whatever he was thinking. The motion filed at 8 the following morning. By 10, Harold Alcott had received it. By 11, word came back through Henry Alcott, who was now officially recused from any direct involvement, but was still communicating through his clerk that the judge was furious. Not publicly. Judges don't show fury publicly when they're practiced at concealment. But in his chambers with his clerk, he had apparently made his feelings clear in terms that the clerk had described to Henry Alcott as memorable, which meant the motion had landed exactly where it needed to. By noon, Harlan Moss arrived at the station. Not Duggan this time. Moss himself. Alone, which was either a concession or a strategy arriving without muscle implied. He was there to talk rather than to threaten, which meant he wanted something he couldn't get by force. Anna answered the door. Elias was visible behind her, standing at the table. Martin Tanner was in the back. Whitfield was in the tack room. She had asked him to stay out of sight, not because she was hiding him, but because she did not want to use him as a provocation before she had to. "Mr. Moss," she said. He looked different today. Not worse exactly, but tighter. The practiced pleasantness was still in place, but it was sitting over something less controlled than usual. "Miss Monroe, I was hoping we could speak privately. Anything you'd like to say to me can be said in front of Mr. Carter." A beat. Moss looked at Elias. Something passed between them, old and specific. 10 years old, all the shape of it visible in the 2 seconds they held each other's eyes. "Of course," Moss said. He came inside without being fully invited. He stood rather than sitting. "I want to propose something reasonable." "Go ahead," Anna said. "Drop the conflict of interest motion. Accept a revised boundary settlement, one that I think you'll find genuinely fair, that preserves your water access and your operating capacity. The legal matter goes away. We're neighbors." Anna looked at him. "And the criminal investigation." The slightest pause. "I don't know what you mean." "The survey fraud, 7 properties, Western Range Partners, the payment to James Whitfield." She watched his face. "The death of Rebecca Carter on the North Ridge Road in November 1879. The room went absolutely still. Moss's expression did not collapse. That was the thing about him, he had extraordinary control. But something changed. Something behind the eyes, something in the way he held his jaw. A recalculation happening fast, reassessing how much she actually knew. "Rebecca Carter's death was a tragic accident," he said. His voice was careful. Too careful. "Was it?" Elias said. It was not a question. Moss looked at him. "Carter, whatever you think happened, I think you sent a man to stop my wife on that road," Elias said. "I think she was carrying documentation that would have exposed your survey fraud and your land acquisition scheme. And I think whoever you sent to stop her made sure she didn't arrive." His voice was level. Completely level. The kind of level that comes not from absence of emotion, but from having made a decision about what to do with it. "I've thought that for 10 years. I just didn't have proof." "And now," Moss said quietly. "Now I have my wife's journal," Elias said, in her own handwriting, dated 11 days before she died, describing what she found, who she found it about, and what she intended to do with it. Moss said nothing. "And James Whitfield," Anna said, "who arrived here 2 days ago and has been sitting in our tack room preparing a sworn statement for the past 48 hours. Something moved across Moss's face. For exactly 1 second the control broke. Not dramatically, just a flicker. A crack in the surface, the expression of a man who has built something for years, watching the foundation move. Then it was gone. "You're making serious allegations," he said. "We're presenting documented evidence to a judge," Anna said. "That's what courts are for." Moss looked between them. He was calculating, still calculating, even now. It was the thing about a certain kind of man, they keep calculating right up until the moment the calculation stops working. "What do you want?" he said finally. "Nothing from you," Anna said. "We want the court to have what it needs. That's all." Another silence. Then Moss straightened his coat, put his hat back on, and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the frame. "You understand what you're starting," he said. "Not a threat exactly, an observation, the kind that carries the memory of past consequences." "You started it," Elias said. 11 years ago on a road in the dark." Moss left without another word. That afternoon was the longest of Anna's time in Silver Pine Valley. Waiting was always worse than doing. She reorganized the tack room. She checked the horses. She went over the documents for the 4th time. She did everything except allow herself to imagine the ways this could go wrong, because that road was infinite and led nowhere useful. At 4 o'clock, she was at the corral when Elias came and stood beside her. They stood without talking for a while, which was something she had come to understand was actually a form of communication with him. Then he said, "I owe you something." She looked at him. I've been telling myself since you arrived that I was helping because it was the right thing to do, because it was about justice and land fraud and Rebecca." He paused. "That's true, but it's not all of it." She waited. "I stopped letting myself care about things," he said. "Not people in crisis. I'd still ride out in a blizzard for anyone who needed it. But caring about a specific person, a specific future, I stopped doing that." He looked straight ahead at the mountains. "You didn't ask me to start again. You didn't try to fix anything. You just—" He stopped. "You were just exactly what you were, every single day." Anna was quiet for a moment. "I wasn't trying to be anything." "I know, that's why it worked." She looked at him. The afternoon light was long and golden, and she thought, this is the kind of moment that gets built into you, the kind you carry forward. "Elias," she said, "when this is finished, whatever happens in that courtroom—" She paused. "I'm not leaving Silver Pine Valley." He looked at her. "I came here to build something," she said. "I intend to do that. I intend to be here in 5 years and 10 years and beyond." She held his gaze. "I'm not telling you that as an invitation or a declaration. I'm telling you because you should know that whoever becomes part of my life here is choosing something permanent. I don't do temporary." She paused. "I thought you should understand that before anything else." Howe was quiet for a long moment. The wind moved through the pine trees on the ridge, and something in his posture, that particular contained tension he carried everywhere, shifted. Not disappeared. Shifted. Like something had moved from one side of a scale to another. "Rebecca used to say," he said slowly, "that I made everything harder than it needed to be. That I overthought things that should just be felt." He looked at Anna. "She was right." "She usually was," Anna said. "From everything you've told me." "Yes." Something crossed his face, grief and warmth and something new all at once. "She would have liked you. She would have thought you were one of the most interesting people she'd ever met, and she would have told you so directly within the first 5 minutes." Anna looked at him steadily. "I would have liked her." "I know you would have." They stood side by side at the corral for another long moment. Then Elias turned to go back inside, and Anna caught his arm, not to stop him, just a hand on his forearm for 1 second. He stopped, looked down at her hand, looked at her. "Thank you," she said, "for not running when I found that box." He looked at her for a long moment. His hand came up and covered hers briefly, a second, 2 seconds, and then he nodded once and went inside. Anna turned back to the mountains. The hearing was tomorrow. That night, Whitfield asked to see the documents one more time. He went through them methodically, his hands steadier than they'd been in days, and when he finished, he set them down and said, "I understand what's going to be asked of me tomorrow." "Tell me," Anna said. "The judge will ask me to confirm the surveys were falsified at commission, not in error, at commission intentionally, in exchange for payment." He looked up. "She will ask me who gave the commission. I will say Harlan Moss. I will say it with his name out loud in a courtroom. Yes. And she will ask me about the payment, the $400. Yes. And then she will ask why I said nothing for 11 years. A pause. Yes. Whitfield looked at the table. "I have been trying to figure out how to answer that. I keep thinking about what's true and what sounds acceptable, and how those two things don't entirely match." He looked up. "The truth is that I was a coward. I was afraid for myself. And I told myself it wasn't my problem, that the people who lost their land had signed the papers freely, that I was just the surveyor, I was just doing numbers. I told myself that for 11 years. He paused. "I'm going to say that, all of it, in the courtroom." Anna looked at him. "That will be the most damaging thing to your own reputation." "Yes." He folded his hands. "But it's true. And if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it honestly. I don't want to be the man who finally came forward and still managed to make himself look good while doing it." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Get some sleep, Mr. Whitfield," she said. "Tomorrow is going to be a long day." She went to the door, then turned back. "For what it's worth," she said. Coming here, it was the right thing. It doesn't fix everything, but it was the right thing. He nodded. It wasn't absolution, and he wasn't asking for it to be. But it was something real. That was enough to sleep on. Judge Ilara Voss arrived in Durango on Thursday morning on the 6 o'clock stage, which meant she had been traveling since before dawn, which meant she had read Henry Alcott's brief on the road by lantern light, which meant that when she walked into the county courthouse at 8:15, she already knew exactly what kind of day it was going to be. She was 53 years old, compact and precise in the way of someone who had learned that every unnecessary word cost something. She had served as a circuit judge for 9 years, and in that time had developed a particular reputation. She did not tolerate procedural manipulation. She read everything submitted to her, and she remembered details that lawyers assumed she had forgotten. 3 attorneys in the territory had made the mistake of underestimating her. All 3 had found other lines of work. Henry Alcott met her at the courthouse door. She looked at him, looked at the folder under his arm and said, "Tell me what isn't in the brief." He told her, all of it. Standing in the hallway, speaking quietly and precisely for 12 minutes while the courthouse filled around them. When he finished, she said, "The journal. You have the original. Carter will bring it this morning. And Whitfield is prepared to testify. He arrived an hour ago. He's in the witness room." She nodded once. "The boundary proceeding filed under Harold Alcott's docket is stayed as of this moment pending my review of the conflict of interest motion. That is not a ruling, that is a procedural hold while I make a determination. Tell Francis Weld." "Yes, Your Honor." She walked past him toward her chambers. Then she stopped without turning around. "Alcott, the woman who found the documents, Monroe." "Yes. Is she the kind of person who understands what today is going to require of her?" Henry Alcott thought about Anna Monroe for exactly 2 seconds. "Yes, Your Honor. She's exactly that kind of person." Voss walked on. They came into Durango together. Anna Elias Martin Tanner and Ruth Crandall, who had announced the night before that she was closing the dry goods store for the day and attending the hearing, and whose tone had made clear that this was not open for discussion. Tom Briggs drove the wagon. Nobody spoke much on the road. There was nothing left to plan. Everything that could be prepared had been prepared. What remained was the doing of it. Whitfield was already at the courthouse when they arrived. He was sitting alone on a bench in the hallway, hat in his hands, turning it slowly, the way Anna had seen him do at the station. When he saw them come in, he stood up. He looked at Elias first, directly, without flinching, and said, "I'm ready." Elias looked at him for a moment. Then he nodded. Not warmth, not absolution, not yet. But acknowledgement. That was something. The courtroom filled faster than Anna expected. Word had moved through Silver Pine Valley faster than a wagon. Ruth Crandall had not been the only one who decided to close up for the day. She saw Mrs. Hargrove near the back with her husband. She saw the man who ran the livery stable. She saw 2 of the valley's larger landowners who had been in that church meeting with Moss. She saw faces she recognized from her 45 minutes in the church hall and faces she didn't recognize at all. She saw Harlan Moss, who was seated at the respondents' table with a lawyer she didn't recognize, brought in from Denver, probably someone expensive and fast. Moss was dressed carefully. His posture controlled his expression, the practiced neutral of a man who has sat in rooms like this before and knows how to perform confidence. He looked at Anna when she came in. She met his gaze and held it for exactly 3 seconds and then looked away, because she was not going to give him the satisfaction of a flinch, and she was not going to give him the provocation of a stare. Roy Duggan was not in the courtroom. She noticed that. Filed it. Judge Voss entered at 9 o'clock, and the room went quiet in the particular way that rooms do when the person entering has genuine authority rather than just a title. She sat. She looked at the room, not performing, just assessing, taking in the faces and the shape of the gathering, the way a person does when they understand that a courtroom is a community event as much as a legal one. "We are here today," she said, "on a motion to stay a boundary proceeding filed in this county, and on a related evidentiary matter pertaining to land survey records and related criminal allegations. This will be conducted in proper order. There will be no outbursts. There will be no commentary from the gallery. Anyone who cannot manage that will be removed without discussion. She looked at both tables. Counsel, are your parties ready? Francis Weld said yes. The Denver lawyer said yes. Then let's begin. The first hour was procedural, and Anna forced herself to follow every word of it, even when her mind wanted to move faster. Francis Weld presented the conflict of interest motion with clean, precise logic. The connection between Harold Alcott's court and Henry Alcott's pending criminal matter, the impossibility of an impartial proceeding under those conditions. The Denver lawyer objected twice. Voss overruled him both times without elaboration, which was its own kind of statement. At 10:15, Voss granted the stay and formally reassigned the boundary proceeding to her own docket. The Denver lawyer's jaw tightened. Moss at the table did not visibly react, but his hand resting on the table pressed flat for just a moment too long. "We will now proceed," Voss said, "to the evidentiary matter." Henry Alcott presented the case in the order they had planned. The 7 survey filings, first the pattern, the dates, the consistent directional benefit to Western Range partners. He was methodical and clear, and Anna watched the room while he talked. She could see people following it, the landowners near the back sitting forward slightly, Mrs. Hargrove with her head tilted, listening hard. Then, the corporate records. Henry Alcott had spent 2 days tracing Western Range Partners' ownership structure, and he had found it not cleanly, not simply, but conclusively. The company's registered principles, filed with the Denver corporate office in 1876, included a silent partner listed under a holding entity called Silver Mountain Interests. Silver Mountain Interests was wholly owned by Harlan Moss. Alcott read the name aloud. The room moved. Not dramatically, a collective shift in breathing, a murmur that Voss quieted with one look, but it was there. The landowners near the back exchanged glances. Mrs. Hargrove put her hand over her mouth. The livery stableman looked down at his hat. Moss did not move. He was still performing composure. But the Denver lawyer leaned in and said something in his ear, and Moss shook his head, once a small, sharp movement. Whitfield took the stand at 11 o'clock. He stated his name, his profession, his years of practice. His voice was steady. His hands folded on the railing were still. Alcott walked him through it point by point. The commission from Moss. The nature of the work, not corrections of errors, but deliberate repositioning of boundary lines to redirect water access. The $400 payment which Whitfield confirmed had been deposited into a personal account in Durango under instructions from Moss's representative. The dates. The properties. All 7. The Denver lawyer's cross-examination was aggressive, and it was skilled, and it did not shake Whitfield on a single material fact. Then Alcott said, "Mr. Whitfield, you have testified that you knowingly submitted falsified surveys. You have testified that you were paid to do so. Why in 11 years did you say nothing?" Whitfield looked at the judge. Not at the gallery, not at Moss, at Voss. "Because I was afraid for myself," he said. "I had debts. I had a family. I told myself I was just the surveyor. I was doing numbers, not making decisions. I told myself the people who signed the transaction documents did so freely." He paused. "I told myself those things for 11 years because I needed to sleep at night. They were not true. I knew they were not true when I told them to myself. I am telling the court that now clearly and on record, because the man who commissioned this fraud also had a woman killed on the North Ridge Road when she tried to bring documentation of it to the county authority. And I will not be silent about that anymore." The room erupted. Voss's gavel came down twice hard clean. Quiet. The room quieted. She looked at Whitfield. "You have made a serious allegation. Do you have documentation to support it?" "The journal does," Alcott said, standing. "Your Honor, I have a sworn affidavit from Mr. Elias Carter regarding the contents of his late wife's personal journal, and I would like to enter the journal itself into evidence." Elias stood. He walked to the front of the room, and he placed the journal on the clerk's table himself. He did not look at Moss. He looked at the journal for one moment, a single breath, and then he stepped back and stood very straight. Anna watched him and did not look away. The journal went in at 11:45. Alcott read the relevant entries aloud. Rebecca Carter's voice, 11 years gone, filled the courtroom in her own precise handwriting. The dates, the name of the surveyor, the payment she had discovered through a contact at the Durango Bank, her intention to bring the documentation to the county authority the following evening. The entry dated November 3rd, 1879. She died on November 4th. The room was absolutely silent while Alcott read. Not the silence of inattention, the silence of people understanding fully and completely what they were hearing. Mrs. Hargrove was crying quietly. She was not the only one. The livery stableman had his head down. Two of the valley landowners were looking at Moss with expressions that had changed completely from when they'd walked in. Moss was looking at the table in front of him. For the first time, he was not looking at anyone in the room. His lawyer was writing something rapidly on a notepad. Moss looked at it, shook his head again. The lawyer wrote something else. Moss put his hand over the notepad, not to read it, to stop it. The twist came at 12:10, and it came from a direction no one in the room had anticipated. The door at the back of the courtroom opened. Roy Duggan walked in. He was not dressed the way he dressed when he worked for Moss. No heavy coat, no practiced ease. He was dressed plainly. He was carrying a leather folder, and he walked to the front of the room with the particular deliberateness of a man who has made a decision he is not going to unmake. Voss looked at him. "This proceeding is in session." "Yes, Your Honor." Dugan's voice was steady. "My name is Roy Duggan. I've been employed by Harlan Moss for 8 years. I have documents I would like to submit to this court." The Denver lawyer was on his feet. "Objection. This witness has not been called." "Sit down," Voss said. She looked at Dugan. "What documents?" Duggan opened the folder. "Ledger pages from Mr. Moss's personal accounts. Payments made between 1877 and 1882 to James Whitfield. Payments made to a man named Cole Reardon in November 1879. Mr. Reardon is deceased, but these records document what he was paid for." He paused. "I've had these for 3 years. I've been deciding what to do with them." Alcott was already moving forward. Voss held up one hand stop and looked at Dugan directly. "Mr. Duggan, you are aware that submitting this documentation may expose you to legal consequences regarding your own role in these events." "Yes, Your Honor." "And you are submitting it voluntarily?" "Yes." He looked at Moss. For the first time since entering, he looked directly at him. "I drove that road the night Rebecca Carter died. I didn't know what Reardon was going to do. Moss told me to follow her and report back where she went. I stayed back. I heard the accident, what I thought was an accident." His voice stayed level, but something underneath it was not. "It took me 7 years to understand that it wasn't, and another year to accept that I had been part of it by being on that road." He set the folder on the clerk's table. "I'm not asking for anything. I just won't carry this anymore." Moss stood up. "Harlan." His lawyer grabbed his arm. Moss shook him off. He looked at Dugan with an expression that had finally completely dropped the practiced surface. Underneath it was something ugly and cold and very afraid. "You have no idea," Moss said, "what you've just done." "I know exactly what I've done," Dugan said. He did not raise his voice. "Sit down, Harlan." Voss's gavel. "Mr. Moss, sit down, or I will have you removed." Moss sat, slowly, like a man whose legs have decided something before his brain catches up. What happened in the next 40 minutes was the methodical, unstoppable work of a court that has everything it needs. Voss examined Dugan's documents. She examined the ledger entries. The payments to Whitfield matched the dates of the 7 survey filings precisely. The payment to Cole Reardon, $450, dated November 4, 1879, was recorded on the same page with a notation that read, "North Road done. Done." One word. 11 years of grief and silence, and a man who stopped being able to live inside his own life, compressed into one word in a ledger column. Elias, sitting 2 rows back, looked at that word when Alcott read it aloud. His jaw went tight. Anna, sitting beside him, put her hand over his on the bench. He did not pull away. Voss looked up from the documents. She looked at Moss. "Mr. Moss," she said. Her voice was not raised. It was the most controlled, precise thing in the room. "You will be taken into custody at the conclusion of this proceeding, pending a formal criminal hearing on charges, including conspiracy to commit fraud, fraudulent land transfer, and conspiracy in the death of Rebecca Carter." She paused. "Your counsel may advise you of your rights. The sheriff's office has been notified." The Denver lawyer was on his feet with 3 objections at once. Voss acknowledged none of them. Moss looked around the room. He looked at the landowners who had been in the church meeting with him 2 days ago. Both of them were looking at the floor. He looked at the gallery, all the faces from Silver Pine Valley, the people who had trusted him and done business with him and believed his version of every story for years. He looked at Mrs. Hargrove, who had wiped her eyes and was now looking at him with an expression that was not anger, but something quieter and more final, the look of a woman who has realized she was used. He looked at Roy Duggan, who was standing with his arms at his sides and his eyes forward, not at Moss. He looked finally at Elias Carter. Elias looked back at him. He did not speak. He did not need to. He sat completely still and let Moss look at him. Let him see what 11 years of a life half-lived looked like in a person's face, and what it looked like when that same person had gotten to the other side of it. Moss looked away first. His shoulders dropped by a fraction of an inch. It was the only thing that broke. But it broke completely. 2 deputies came through the side door. They were professional and quiet about it, no dramatics. Moss stood when they reached him. He buttoned his coat, a strange, habitual gesture completely ordinary, and walked out between them without speaking. The room let out a long breath. Duggan was still standing at the front. He turned to go, and Anna said, "Mr. Dugan." He stopped. She stood up. "You were on that road." "Yes." "You didn't know what was going to happen." He looked at her. His face was complicated, not looking for absolution, but not entirely without hope of it either. "I should have known. I should have asked more questions instead of following orders." He paused. "That's not an excuse. It's just what's true. What you brought today," she said carefully, "gave Rebecca Carter's death a name and a record. That matters." She paused. "What you do with the rest of it is between you and whatever you believe in." He nodded once. Then he walked out. The boundary proceeding took 35 minutes after that. Voss voided the Western Range Partners boundary challenge on the grounds that the survey documentation supporting it was fraudulent. She voided all 7 property transfer records connected to the falsified surveys. She issued a formal order directing the county land registry to restore the original boundary designations on all 7 properties. The Tanner land was on the list. Martin, sitting 2 rows ahead of Anna, put both hands over his face when Alcott read the property descriptions aloud. His shoulders moved once. He pulled his hands down and looked at the ceiling and breathed. Ruth Crandall beside him put her hand on his arm and left it there. Harold Alcott, the judge, not the lawyer, was referred for a separate judicial conduct review. Voss did not rule on his guilt. She was not the appropriate body for that. But the referral meant the machinery was moving, and machinery that starts moving in that direction does not tend to stop. The hearing concluded at 2:15 in the afternoon. They stood outside the courthouse in the thin November light. All of them, Anna and Elias and Martin and Ruth and Whitfield and Tom Briggs, who had waited the entire 5 hours on the wagon bench without going inside. Nobody said anything for the moment. There are things that happen that words reach for and don't quite get, and that was one of them. Then Ruth Crandall said, "Well, I'm going to need to open the store tomorrow." It broke something loose in the air, and several people laughed. Genuine laughter, the kind that comes up from relief. Martin Tanner looked at Anna. His eyes were red. He did not apologize for it. "The land," he said. "I don't know yet what I'll do with it. Whether we go back or sell it properly, or—" He stopped. "But it's ours again. Whatever we decide, it's ours." "That's what matters," Anna said. He nodded. Then he turned to Elias, and something passed between them. 2 men who had each lost something to Moss's violence, one, a father's land and a wife meeting each other in the aftermath of it being named. Martin extended his hand. Elias took it. Neither of them spoke. It was enough. Whitfield stood slightly apart. He had answered every question, said everything he had promised to say, and now he looked hollowed out in the particular way of someone who has put down something very heavy and is still adjusting to the absence of the weight. Anna went to him. "Where will you go?" she asked. "Back to Pueblo, I suppose. My practice, what's left of it." He looked at her. "There will be legal consequences for me. I know that." "Yes, probably. I think," he said slowly, "that I can manage that better than I manage the alternative." He paused. "Thank you for letting me be part of this." She did not say it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Whitfield." He shook her hand. He shook Elias's hand longer with more weight on both sides. Then he walked to his horse and rode toward the south road. They were the last to leave. Ruth had gone with Tom Briggs. Martin had a room at the Durango boarding house for the night. The others had dispersed back to the valley, back to their lives, with something changed in the middle of them. Elias brought the wagon around. Anna climbed up. He climbed up beside her. They rode for a while without talking, which was still the most natural thing between them. Then she said, "I keep thinking about what Rebecca wrote in the last entry." He looked at her. She wrote, "I don't know if this will change anything, but I know that staying quiet is the same as agreeing with it, and I can't do that." Anna paused. She knew she might not succeed. She went anyway. "Yes," Elias said quietly. "She did change something. It took 11 years, but she changed it." Anna paused. "She was going to be a mother." "Yes. She should have had that." "Yes." His voice was simple, straightforward. Not broken something past, broken something that has been rebuilt differently. She should have, and she didn't. And I can be angry about that and still be grateful for what's happened this week. Those two things can both be true. "They can," Anna said. He looked at her. The light was going, and the mountains were dark against the sky, and the road home was long, and neither of them was in any hurry. "Anna." He said her name the way people say a name when they have been thinking about using it and have finally decided. "I meant what I said at the corral." "I know you did. I want to say the rest of it." She turned to look at him. "I've been half a person for 10 years, he said. "I didn't know that's what I was doing. I thought I was being careful. I thought I was protecting myself from loss." He paused. "You came here, and you were so completely yourself that it made me embarrassed at how little of myself I'd kept working." He paused again. "I don't want to be careful anymore. Not about this." Anna held his gaze. "Then don't be," she said. 6 months later, they were married in the meadow beside the horse station on a Saturday in May, when the valley was green and the mountain air had finally let go of winter. It was not a large ceremony. Ruth Crandall was there. Martin Tanner rode down from the north where he had gone back to his father's land with his younger brother to begin the work of rebuilding. Tom Briggs came with his wife. Henry Alcott came from Durango, looking pleased in the way of someone who has seen a thing through to its proper end. Mrs. Hargrove came and sat in the front row and cried in the uncomplicated way of someone who has decided to be fully present. The night before, Anna had found Elias sitting on the porch bench he had built in the spring, the one he hadn't thought was necessary, but had built anyway, because some things are worth doing, even without a practical purpose. She sat beside him. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Yes." He thought for a moment. "I was thinking about Rebecca, wondering if that's strange." "It's not strange. She would want this," he said. "I know that. It doesn't mean I don't think about her." "Thinking about her is part of who you are," Anna said. "I knew that before I said yes to anything." She paused. "I'm not asking you to be someone without a history." He looked at her. "What are you asking?" "Just to be here," she said. "Tomorrow and after that, that's all." He nodded. "I can do that." They sat in the dark for a while, the way people sit when they are comfortable enough together to have nothing to prove. "Elias," she said after a while, What did Rebecca look like? Howe was quiet for a moment. Then he told her brown hair, quick eyes, a laugh she couldn't keep quiet even when she tried. He talked for 20 minutes carefully and honestly, and Anna listened to all of it. She asked questions. She let him tell it. When he was done, she said, "She sounds like someone worth knowing." "She was," he said, "the best kind." "Then we'll keep her," Anna said simply. "In the story, where she belongs." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "I love you, Anna." She had known it was coming and still felt the full weight of it when it arrived. She did not answer immediately. She let it settle, the particular gravity of those words from this specific man. A man who had learned how much they could cost and was saying them anyway. "I know," she said. "I love you too." The ceremony. The next morning was simple and real in the way of things that have been earned rather than arranged. Pastor Green kept it short because Anna had asked him to. The valley rang with the sound of people who were genuinely glad. When Anna said her vows, she stopped once. Not from uncertainty. Elias saw it in her face, immediately saw that it wasn't hesitation, but something deliberate. She stopped and breathed and felt each word before she said it, the way you do when you want to remember, not just that you said something, but how it felt to mean it completely. She looked at him while she spoke. Not at the crowd, not at her hands. At him. When it was over and he put the ring on her finger, Ruth Crandall said, "Finally," loud enough for 3 rows to hear, and everyone laughed, including Anna, including Elias. A full, real laugh, the kind he hadn't used in so long it felt new in his chest. Martin Tanner stood at the back of the gathering and watched. He thought about his father, who had sold his land in shame and gone north and died without knowing that what was taken from him would be returned. He thought about what the return of it had felt like, the legal document in his hands, reading his family name on a property deed that was rightfully theirs again. He had sat with his brother for a long time that evening, and they had not talked about what to do next. They had just sat with the fact of it. Sometimes the return of a thing takes time to become real. He looked at Elias Carter, who had not danced at anything in 11 years now, moving through the meadow with Anna's hand in his, in something that was close enough to dancing to count. He looked at Anna, who had arrived in this valley alone and had not waited to be rescued by it, but had instead reached into it with both hands and pulled something just out. He thought his father would have liked her. He thought Rebecca Carter would have liked her too. He lifted his glass. "To the ones who stayed," he said quietly, to no one in particular. Ruth Crandall was close enough to hear. She lifted her glass too. "To the ones who stayed," she agreed. The horse station was fully operational by the following spring. Anna hired 2 hands and established relay contracts with 3 separate freight companies running routes through the valley. She was the only woman running a working horse station in that part of Colorado, a fact that various people mentioned to her at various times over the years in various tones, and to all of them she said the same thing: yes, and Elias built a proper workshop beside the corral. He still fixed things for people who needed it, still rode out in bad weather, still repaired the widow's fences, still helped anyone who asked. But he came home. Every evening he came home. He unlocked the room where he had kept Rebecca's things. He didn't change anything in it. He just stopped locking it. He told Anna, "It's not a shrine. It's just a room with some things in it that mattered." "Then it should have air," she said. She was right, as she generally was, about the things that mattered. The valley changed in ways that were slow and then obvious all at once, the way real change tends to work. The land restored to the Tanner family and the others was farmed and built on and loved again. Harold Alcott resigned from the bench before the judicial conduct process concluded, which was understood by everyone to mean what it meant. The land registry hired a new surveyor recommended by Francis Weld, who had taken on 3 additional property fraud cases in the territory following the Moss hearing, and was building a reputation for exactly the kind of work that needed doing. Harlan Moss was convicted the following winter on charges of conspiracy and fraud. The conspiracy charge relating to Rebecca Carter's death was harder to prove without the man. Reardon, who was dead, and in the end carried a lesser sentence than justice deserved. But it carried one. He sold his ranch to cover legal fees and left the territory. The last anyone in Silver Pine Valley heard of him, he was in Kansas. He did not prosper. The community did not say this with satisfaction exactly. They said it with the quiet acknowledgement of people who have watched the world settle accounts in its own time. Roy Duggan served a reduced sentence in exchange for his full cooperation. He settled in New Mexico afterward and opened a small livestock brokerage. He wrote one letter to Elias, which said very little, but said it honestly. Elias read it once, put it in a drawer, and did not write back. That was the most either of them could manage, and it was sufficient. In the spring of the third year, Anna came in from the corral one afternoon and found Elias at the table with Rebecca's journal open in front of him. I was not distressed. He was just reading the way you read something you loved and wanted to have with you for a moment. She set her hand briefly on his shoulder as she passed. He reached up and covered it with his just for a second. She went on to the kitchen. He closed the journal. He sat for a moment with his hand resting on the cover. Then he said quietly to the room, to her, to whatever of Rebecca lived in the journal, and in the unlocked room, and in the years of a life half lived, and then finally fully lived, he said, "I'm all right. I want you to know that." Anna heard him from the kitchen. She did not answer because she understood it was not directed at her. She let him have the moment that it was. Outside the mountains were the same mountains they had always been, indifferent to human grief, indifferent to human repair, present for all of it in the way that large and ancient things are present, without opinion, without consolation. Simply there. The valley moved through another afternoon. The horses in the corral moved quietly. The wind in the pine trees said nothing and everything. The broken cowboy had finally stayed. Not because someone fixed him, not because someone told him the pain was over, but because someone sat beside him while he found his way back to himself and did not rush the process and did not ask him to be something he wasn't, and was so completely and unapologetically herself that it reminded him slowly over days and weeks and one very long hard year what it felt like to be completely himself too. That was the whole of it. That was enough.